research. How's everybody doing?
Awesome.
Everything is awesome? Kate, everything is awesome, right?
Special attitude.
Yes, everything is awesome. Good. All right, so we're going to talk today about a variety of different research concepts. And I want to start by talking about the differences between reporting studies, descriptive studies. Who could help us out and tell us a little bit about, let's start with reporting studies. What do you think? What's a reporting study? You guys remember?
It's a summation of data.
Yeah, so a reporting study is a summation of data that already exists. So it could be, for example, information that's already in our files. It could be trade articles, so articles that appear in trade journals about the industry. So a reporting study is basically a study that summarizes information that's in those documents. So we're not trying to draw conclusions or inferences. It's important, certainly, when we conduct primary research for us to be able to draw conclusions and inferences, because remember we said that we're not conducting a census. We want to study a particular population, but within that population we're only looking at a sample. We're only looking at a sample, and Kate told us in a prior class that usually that's around 1,000 participants, 1,000 to 1,500 participants. So if we conducted the research properly and we were able to get a representative random sample, then our expectation is that those findings based on the sample is something that we could extrapolate to the entire target population that we're studying. So it's the target population that we're conducting research about. So when we say population, don't think we're automatically talking about the entire population, let's say in the United States. It might be. That could be our target population. But let's just say, for example, that our target population is all males in the United States. Or all males that are between the ages of 18 and 40. And so within that target population that we're studying, we're going to get input from a sample. And we want to be able to draw conclusions and inferences about the entire population. But a reporting study, we don't need to do that. Like Kate said, we're summarizing information that already exists. So we don't need to draw conclusions. You shouldn't expect in a reporting study that you're going to draw conclusions. It's probably not feasible even to draw conclusions based on what we're summarizing. So we're just summarizing the information that we have about the industry, the market size, for example, the growth rate of the industry, the demographics of the consumer, trends in the industry. So that would be a reporting study. What about a descriptive study? A descriptive study
tries to get answers as to who, what, when, sometimes how.
Yes, so everybody heard what Deborah said? Say it again, Deborah.
It tries to discover answers to the questions who, what, when, and sometimes how.
Right, who, what, when, and how. That's different from a reporting study, isn't it?
Also where.
Yeah, so who, what, when, where, how. We're trying to, in a descriptive study, we're trying to answer those questions. So what we should expect to find in a descriptive study is information that's going to answer those questions about the market, the category, the consumer that we're targeting, for example. Anything else that's important to note about a descriptive study? What else besides what Deborah shared with us? Anything else? What makes a descriptive study different from a reporting study? What do you think?
Maybe the information, maybe the answer that we find is, like you said, the reporting study about the information which already exists. But in descriptive study, when we answer the question, we might get completely new information which we never knew about before.
So we're collecting...
Primary, basically.
Yeah, we're collecting new data. We could be collecting new data. And it involves the relationship between variables. But importantly, in the descriptive study, are we going to have an answer in terms of the relationship between those variables?
No.
No.
So in a descriptive study, we're not going to answer the question, why? We're not going to know why the variables respond the way they do. So notice what could be the variables? For example, the level of sales and price. So what do we want to understand as part of our research? Don't we do research to understand the price elasticity of demand? When we talk about purchase intent, well, we want to gauge the target market's response to a particular concept, but isn't certainly one of the factors they're going to consider the price? So we're going to ask them their purchase intent based on a particular concept. But then we need to probe further and find out, well, at what price would they buy that product? Because sure, they might say it's a great concept. I would buy that. But then at what price? We need to know what price they're willing to pay. So often we're studying the relationship between price and the level of demand. So what percentage of the people would buy the product at a particular price? What else? Anything else? What about explanatory? How is an explanatory study different? So we're talking about different types of research studies. So we could classify research studies in different ways. Reporting, descriptive, explanatory, predictive. So what is an explanatory research study?
It actually answers the question why one variable causes changes in another variable.
And importantly, how? So an explanatory study, if we do research that we could categorize as an explanatory research study, then Kate says we could answer the question why, and importantly, how? In what way? What would be an example? So we have a hypothesis. When we do research, we have a hypothesis. Our guess as to the relationship between two variables.
Process and result.
What was that?
Process and result.
I can't hear you.
Process and result.
Okay, so explain that further.
Like it should be give the answer for the hypothesis, what should the process and what should the result of the hypothesis.
So you said that there's a process. We're doing research about a particular process? Could be. We're doing research about a particular process. Like, for example, when we talked about qualitative studies, we said that a type of qualitative study we might do is job analysis. And what is job analysis about? Well, job analysis, when we do that type of research, we're trying to understand the processes. So at work, people complete certain tasks. Well, they complete those tasks as part of a process. So we want to understand, we want to analyze that job to determine whether or not, as in your example, whether or not the process can be improved. Is it efficient? How would we know? What's one of the ways we could measure a process? What's something that would be a good key result indicator if we're going to measure a process? Any process. Whether it's related to tasks that we're completing or not. What do you think would be a good way to measure a process?
It could be effective to the organization goal.
So whether or not the tasks being completed are supporting the goals of the organization. So very often people complete tasks, they're not even sure why they're filling out those forms anymore. They just know that they've been filling out those forms for years. But is that filling out of the form helping us to achieve an organizational goal? Or is it basically just like busy work? What about time? Time would be a good indicator of the effectiveness of a process. If we're doing job analysis, one of the key things that we're going to track is how long does it take to complete a particular task? Can we do it in less time? Maybe we could take out some of the steps. And we can compare the productivity of workers. So are some workers able to complete the task quicker than others? What about a predictive study? Predictive modeling. So we do studies, we're trying to understand predictive modeling.
We can make reference in the future. I mean, well, it's actually the name says for itself. We can do predictions based on the relationship between one variable and.
So if we gather enough data, ultimately we want to be able to develop a model. So what the model is going to tell us is that, for example, go ahead. For example, what demand might be at a particular price. So certainly, when we do a regression analysis, after we gather the data, and we're going to do a regression analysis, what we're trying to understand is the relationship amongst the variables. A multiple regression analysis, not 2 variables, 3, 4, 5, 10 variables. Our challenge is that we have a lot of, what, dependent or independent variables?
Independent.
So we have a lot of independent variables that are impacting the dependent variable. Our challenge is to try and understand what is the nature of that relationship. What impact does each of those independent variables have on the dependent variable? Ultimately, our goal would be to develop a model so that we continue to do a sensitivity analysis to plug in, for example, the different prices to try and understand what demand would be at a different price. Now, we said we're going to get participants. In Chapter 2, we talk about the issue of ethics and privacy and informed consent. What is the issue of informed consent? So what? We're going to get 1,000 respondents. So that means our market researchers are in the field in different cities, and they're getting participants to complete our questionnaire. What is informed consent? So when we do research, there needs to be informed consent. The participants need to know, basically, what they're getting themselves into.
And they need to agree.
And they need to agree to participate. So we need to tell them, for example, does participating in this research involve any physical testing? Are they going to be involved in any physical testing? So, are we going to hook up any electrodes to them? Is there going to be any pain? Are we going to give them any kind of shocks? Other than the questions. They might find the questions shocking. But are we going to give them any type of electrical shocks? How long is the questionnaire going to take? So we need to make them aware and get their consent to participating in the research. Very important. A very important part of research is informed consent. So we need to give them enough information about the research that we're doing. Very often we tell them who the sponsor is. We tell them how long it's going to take. We tell them if there's going to be any physical harm to them, or if they have to drink something or eat something, what the side effects could be. Anything else? And so they have to sign a form that says that they agree to participate and that they're aware of all the parameters, like some of the examples that we just discussed. Now you might be thinking, in the scenario that you have in your mind, you might not think that that applies. But very often, there is testing that's done. So for example, think about if you're coming out with a new medication to relieve headaches. So you want people to participate in the research. Somebody's got to take the pills, right? At some point, are people not gonna take the medication? And so you need to make them aware as to what happens, or what you expect to happen. That they might get dizzy, or they might get nauseous. The headache might go away, but there may be some side effects. So they need to know about all the procedures of the research, and they need to agree to participate. What's the issue with rights to privacy? What is that about? What is the expectation? So the participants have a certain expectation as it relates to privacy.
That their information will be kept secure, will be kept confidential. Even when we take the information, maybe enter it into the computers at the time when we might have to destroy that information, that we will securely destroy and would not just be put outside in a garbage can where everyone had access to it. That if for any reason we were to share that information, we would, the person who's given the information would be notified even before at our privacy point. It would state that who the information will be shared with, or it will state that we will not be sharing your information. So all this information they have the right to know before you take it and do whatever.
Exactly. So the participants expect that their information is going to be kept confidential. That's going to be private. We're capturing all this information about them. We're asking them, certainly one of the some of the meaningful questions involve information about the person. Isn't that true? Because we want to identify segments. So we want to identify their gender, their age, where they live, their household income. So it's very common to segment markets demographically. You want to know what is their ethnicity?
This is a law, basically, in the States.
Well, murder is against the law, but people do it anyway. So what I'm emphasizing is that, yes, that we need to protect the privacy of the participants, absolutely. Whether it's legally required, we have an ethical responsibility as a researcher to keep that information private. All right. Let's talk now about concepts. Questions about rights to privacy, confidentiality, informed consent, non-disclosure.
Now, what about if the right to privacy also includes, like, and participant can refuse to the interview or refuse to answer a particular question in the survey?
Right, absolutely. So a participant could has the right to not answer a particular question. From a research perspective, that's certainly not ideal for us to have a non-response, but certainly they have an option to not answer a particular question if it makes them feel uncomfortable. So what's a concept? Very often we're testing concepts.
This meaning characteristics are an event, offer, an event, any kind of situation.
So are you giving us an example or a definition? So it sounds like that's a source of a concept, is a personal experience. But how would you just define a concept? It's a collection of what? Yeah, collection of meanings and characteristics. What else?
Behavior.
What was that?
Behavior.
Ideas?
No, behavior.
Behavior. Yes, absolutely. So behavior, objects, behaviors, all of those are,
Condition, situations.
yep. All of those are examples of a concept. A collection of meanings or characteristics associated with those events, those objects, those behaviors, those conditions, those situations. And where do they come from? Because remember, we're talking about this, you say, okay, so I got it, so that's what a concept is. These situations, events, behaviors. Why do we care about that? Well, those are things that we test. We test concepts. So, for example, in introducing a new product, we're going to test a variety of concepts. And concepts, a source of concepts could be from personal experience. That could be a source of concepts. What else? What could be another source of a concept? What do you think? So personal experience. Remember, we're talking about concepts that we're testing. What about other languages?
Oh, yeah.
What about
Sciences, like
some type of jargon or terminology?
or field of study, like
Field of study. Those are examples of sources of concepts. So what does that mean, a field of study?
Math, physics, like all the different.
So for example, is there something from the field of physics, for example?
It could be field of business too.
Yeah, the field of business that is a source of a concept that we could develop and test. Other languages could be a source of a concept. So, other than English, what about other languages? Can other languages be a source of a concept that could have viability? Well, think, for example, of branding, like brand names. Is another language other than English, or some field of study, a source of a concept for a brand name? I would think so. If you're going to develop a brand name, well, what's an area, what's a source for potential brand names? You wouldn't think that maybe a word in another language could be a brand name for your new product? As long as it's not the Chevy Nova, and we're okay. The Chevy Nova, the Chevy No-Go. Sell a lot of no-go cars, right?